Hello everyone, we are back. Those of you that were with us on Facebook yesterday, thought I would do a review on YouTube, so that hopefully we can get a few more hits and subscribers and all that stuff. And obviously over this lockdown period, we're going to have a lot of time to chat about RC cars, seeing as me personally, I'm not going to have much to do as I am on furlough and still wanting to enjoy the hobby that I am addicted to. Anyway, so just a very quick one from me in terms about where I stand in the RC world. I'm not a team driver. I do not subscribe to any particular brand. Good afternoon, James Stewart. Welcome along. James, obviously, a fantastic racer himself. Used to work for CML. Now has gone on to bigger and broader things. Nice to have you along, James. So for me personally, I've got a passion for the hobby. 12 scale is my thing. I've done a little bit of buggy racing as well as a bit of a contrast to buggy racing. And as I say, 12 scale has really been my thing as I moved on from GT12. As I say, I don't run for Schumacher. I don't run for X-Ray. I used to run the X-Ray 20 car. And then when I went to the Hoodie Arena of the Euros, my X-Ray couldn't quite cope with the barriers at the Hoodie Arena because I'm not that great a driver, and I crashed into a few things and it kept on braking. I watched a lot of good drivers give their Schumacher Eclipse a good whack, and it was robust enough to suggest that it didn't tweak and it would keep going under the most violent of crashes. Afternoon, Lee Palmer. Nice to have you along. And so I then moved from the X-Ray over to the Schumacher Eclipse, and personally, it took a little bit of time getting used to the fact that it's a sort of very different style of car. There's no centre shock, as you'll see on the screen here, and then you've got other variables as well, which I'll go through. So this video is not promoted by anyone other than me, just trying to give a bit more insight and something a bit more engaging into the hobby that we all love. So let's kick off with the packaging, because I said yesterday, and sorry if I repeat myself on a few occasions, I think the packaging is a really key part of the hobby. I've also just recently run the Automatics A12, and that was an experience in itself, very different, as we know. And so anyhow, I'll talk about that in a moment, but I think X-Ray do a very good job from packaging their products from the box. Both equally nice, but I'm going to have to say that the X-Ray edges it. I know this all sounds probably a little bit, well, what does a box matter, Stuart? Well, for me, if I'm spending 350 quid on a kit, then I want to get a feeling that I'm buying a top-end product, and you certainly get that feeling when you buy an X-Ray car. You can see that the manual is very nice. If you've never owned an X-Ray car, they do this very well. So here are the two manuals for the two cars, and from the get-go you get the difference between the cars. One's just a A4 pieces of paper bolted together. Again, does everything that you need it to do, but you know, when you're sort of, I'm not sure it's X-Ray's a boutique brand. I just think they're delivering something that you'd expect of a decent quality. Again, not taking anything away from the cars. This is completely the preamble to the car. And when we open up the first page of both of these kits, we can see that very quickly Schumacher just go on to say about all the additional items that are required, some important safety notes, and as I say, the other brands that they support and distribute in the UK. And then we're straight into the kit. Step one, you've got a kit. Obviously, you've got packet. It's numbered. Very simple stuff. Again, X-Ray go another couple of steps further. There are a couple, two dedicated pages of what you're getting involved with. Again, before you start, the customer support, the safety precautions, important notes. These are all stuff or things that, as racers, we all know. Stu Barber's joined us. Welcome along, Stu. Another one that's gone to the E3 races the E3. I think James has recently got an Automatics, and Lee, I think you run the Roche or maybe the Zen 12 scale as well. So 3 12 scalers aboard and watching. Again, it's all stuff that you probably never read after you bought your first X-ray kit, because you'll read it once and then never do it again. And then they're in. Now, something that they've done with this new kit, which I think is phenomenal, is the QR code video tech tip that Alexander Hagberg has introduced, along with obviously probably Martin Hoodie, on how to build a car. Now, as we know, there are many ways that you can put a 12 scale together. I've put it together in many variations, and normally they haven't worked very well for me. But I'm improving, and I think it's bits like this that Alex has gone over that have allowed the consumer to build this car to a very decent specification. Every packet in the X12 has an overview of what you're getting in that pack. So bag one includes these components pretty much, and then you start to go into the build, and very soon you're going into the caster adjustment. You'd scan that QR code down the bottom here, and that would take you to a YouTube clip of Alex explaining what caster is, how you put it together, and how that fits onto the car in a certain way, and he gives you tech tips along the way, which is very good. As I say, remember, this is a generation on. You'd have to arguably say this is sort of 8 to 10 months down the road from the E3 car. Obviously, there's nothing like that in here. Step one is bag one, and I can't remember from the top of my head whether these are the components in bag one, but I'm not sure they are, to be honest. They're not. So bag one is, or step one comes out of bag one, and then step two, and it goes on like that. As I say, there's no QR codes or anything like that, but it does give you some various insights into what you might want to do. So they've got the top decks here on step 7, and there is option A, B, C, and D for the various grip ranges that you would experience with this car. Now, I think this is something that X-Ray is not necessarily good at. Setup tips, should I say setup sheets. I purchased an X-Ray buggy because I was running the X-Ray 12 scale car, and to get an X-Ray setup sheet for a buggy was like, looking for rocking horse shit. It was just brutal. Whereas Alex will always, if you're familiar with Alex Hagberg, he'll always message you back if you message him if you've got any questions. Having said that, Alex is modified, so the carryover from a modified to a stock setup, I think, is quite different. I don't think there isn't too much carryover. There's certainly insights of where you might want to go with it that Alex can recommend, but again, unless you're speaking to someone like Max Keening in the US, excuse me, or someone like Robbie Dodge, who's again a stock specialist in the US, and there's another chap as well that escapes my mind that hopefully will come back. They're guys that you might want to tap up. As I say, I messaged various good buggy drivers, and if they got back to me, it wasn't very useful. But Alex is a different level to that. what the Eclipse setup sheet book does, it actually gives you a couple of setup sheets to start with. One from low grip, one from high grip. I think this is absolutely invaluable. I've been doing 12 scale a decent amount of time, and I'm not too bad at it. But even this stuff I'd still look at this and I'd still take insights from the setup sheets, because it does give you a great understanding of what you might want to change to improve the performance of your car. And I think when you then go on to the cars in a moment, it's your ability to build them and the ability to put an applicable setup sheet on the car. When that all comes together, I think you've then got a chance of running the car and enjoying the experience. If you've built it like a bag of shite, because the setup, because the manual wasn't very good, and then you add on a faulty setup that you don't really know, that might not be right as well. I mean, talk about, throwing darts at a dartboard with your eyes closed, and then you go and whack it a few times, you tweak it when the cars are tweakable, and you bend the pod plate and you don't quite know what that means. Before you know it, a 12th scaler has gone from buying a really nice kit to not having any idea of why their car's not going around the track very nicely. So I think from the absolute get-go that both of these manuals offer two different experiences. X-Ray are not giving you a setup sheet, whereas Schumacher are. X-Ray are really helping you build it proficiently with Alexander Hagberg's help. And the back here, the Eclipse give you all the insights of the various adjustments that you can make on the car and what they will do for your car. I think it's so these pages here at the back, it starts to talk about ride height, roll springs, rear roll damping, track setup, and it gives you an overview of what all of these things do, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Never seen that in a manual before, and I think X-Ray's answer to that is Alex is now telling you how to do that or what that does, instead of having to read it. So I think they both offer a slightly different experience, but they're both formidable. Now, I had an Automatics A12, and a fantastic car. Once it's put together and you stick it down on the track, and I did have a clip, but it had a bug in the clip, so I had to take it down. That when I ran it at the Automatics A12, I ran it at MB models. Out the box, kit setup, epic, truly. I was running behind Steve Donald, he's a good racer, and without changing anything, the car was 100% quicker than the E3. Absolutely no doubt. That's the good part. The bad part, when the box came, it looked like it had been kicked around the back garden. When I then opened it up, none of the bags were numbered, didn't get a manual, had to download it offline, off the internet. And even in the manual that's downloaded online, none of the O-rings had measurements for which should go where. And then the build, I had all of the O-rings out, I was measuring them best I can, and there were a few that were quite close together. It was a minefield. It took me a long time. It took me more time than it should have done, should I say, to build that car. And I actually commented, I think an American chap called Eric Anderson that runs a hobby shop in the US. He said, Max Mackler, lovely guy. He's the Automatic team principal, I think. He said, I've sold many of these, and I've never had anyone come back that's not built it right. Well, if you're building a 12 scale, being quite honest, you don't have to be out by far for the thing to be a bag of poop. In the old days, I think it's slightly changing now with these new cars. So I don't think that anyone is going to say that they put an O-ring in the wrong spot until Max or someone proficient might pick it up and say, oh, that O-ring's not right. And so there starts the issue with a car being built incorrectly and then starting to gradually work its way out. James Stewart, absolutely right. One of the reasons people have always gone well with the X-Ray X12 cars is because more people are able to prepare them to a good standard. It's a big help for a newcomer. Absolutely, James. But I think Schumacher have also done that as well. I think Schumacher have made the car easier generically. My A12 was very, very good on its first run at Tamworth. Obviously not on Alex's level, but happy to help with the car if anyone messes me. So James will help you with the A12 build. But my point, James, is that if someone picked up the X-Ray or picked up the Eclipse, they wouldn't need any help from anybody. There is a caveat, I believe, that they say that there is a certain level or quality of driver that needs to go into the A12 build. So I think that's a small, as I say, caveat that goes with it. So that's really the background of my beliefs in manuals and how important they are. I just don't think you should buy something that is really quite, it takes a fair amount of attention to get them running right, to then not have an actual something in your hands, because I think that's really nice to have a manual flicking through. There's something very tactile about all of this, isn't there? The nice materials, the nice X-ray manual, etc., etc. But we look at the again. I am not an X-ray driver. I'm not someone that is paid to do this stuff. I just do it because I love it, and I'm fortunate enough that I can sample these various kits. But you get a certificate. The bags, X-ray stuff comes in. It's all top end. It's all, but you pay for that, and I think that's the point. There is an added expense. But what I absolutely believe in is that if someone spends a bit more and gets a product that makes their 6-7 hours at the racetrack more enjoyable, I have no doubt that people will be more comfortable with spending a bit more. Absolutely no doubt. Vincent, nice to see you. Welcome along, sir. Don't know you, but please join in the chat. Darren Ford is there as well. Hey Darren, nice to see you. Has someone taken your compact disc filing system? I saw that this morning. Going to a good home. Generous lad that you are. Sorry, slightly off topic there. And the Eclipse box, again, very nice. You can see I have a few spares in here. But this, and I think this is quite a good example of my understanding of belief of where the old X12 and the X12 20 car would be, the Yokomos that I've had, and various other cars that I've had. I've needed to purchase all of this extra stuff. You can see I've got 2 camber straps here. I've got 2 bottom plates, all stuff that I got told that I needed to buy very nicely from Andy Murray. But the reality is, I've got spare chassis in here. The reality is, I've not needed any of this stuff because it's been so robust, and I do give it a whack. I do give my cars a whack, so that's a really nice thing. And I think the X-ray is going to be the same, because the parts the components that you need to buy to run it, the hop-ups, they're really quite limited. Andy Murray said you only need this, this, and this, but if you want this, this, and this, you can get that. Alex Hadberger said, again, sent me a lovely message about the list of parts that you might want to get as spares, and I purchased all those, and that's, again, we'll just go back to this. Sorry, the bits that Alex asked me to purchase, bearing in mind spares as well as optional hot ups. So I've got got 1, 2, 3 sets of springs. So one set of side springs and 2 optional front springs and an optional center spring. I've got a spare bottom plate. I've got a spare rear pod. Bearings will always get those. There's some O-rings as well. I've got a hub and a couple of hubs. So when you're talking about 12 scale, to go to a meeting, what else have I got there? I've got some more bearings as well for the rear. As hop-ups and spares, that's all of it that Alex suggested. That's nothing really. So I think again, this is all stuff that X12 12 scale guys would much prefer, instead of going there with what feels like you've got to take the kitchen sink along. I think these cars are really changing the way they are being built and the way they're being able to be driven so robustly. Vincent, don't you think it's better to put the money of the manual into the car? Downloading the document doesn't sound strange to me. Vincent, absolutely, totally agree. However, X-Ray have been able to deliver a really good quality manual, as well as a good quality car, in my opinion. So I think you can have both. And if it costs an extra £10, I would gladly pay it. I don't think it works against the car for having a manual. Yes, X-Ray and Schumacher are both much more evolved as companies. They are a step ahead of most in that respect. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, anything that leads the way has had more investment, more time spent on it. If you've got a good product, and arguably the A12 is a really good product, not arguably, it is a really good product, the A12 will be successful whether you have the manual or not, I think. But when you're looking for the mass market in a scale, in a hobby that hasn't got that big a market anyway, if you've got, let's say, a really good national meeting in the UK, you've got 80 drivers, and let's say 20 of those people, I think at best 20 of those people have built their car to a high standard. Those 20 people are really your only market for creating a car that hasn't got a manual and hasn't really got a decent build experience. And so the other 60 people in that meeting won't buy that car. So it could be the best thing in the world, but if it can't be built properly and therefore won't run very well, it's a fail before it even gets started. Bortification. Hello, Bortification. Don't know who you are. Introduce yourself if you have a real name. Maybe Bortification is your real name. I totally agree with the quality of manuals. Being new to the hobby and buying an A12 lockdown build, the lack of parts identification was poor. From the horse's mouth, Bortification. Very good. Nice feedback there. So that's really, and happy to chat some more on the manuals as we go along. But now we've got the cars, I'm just going to take my cup of tea here and just have a little sip. If you like the video, it might be nice for you to like and subscribe. The more we can grow this channel, I can then do these live feeds from my mobile device, and then I'll be able to bring it more along. We've also got, what you can see on the screen there is an LMP race series that's going on in the UK. We got thwarted for our first one, which is going to be held at MB Models at the end of November. It's going to be pushed back a weekend. David Borton. Hello, David. Yes, I know you. Fantastic. And have you managed? Did you manage to run the A12? I believe actually you might have run it at Chesterfield. Actually, very good. I digress. So what I did yesterday was start from back to front with the cars, and the differences. Now you can see I obviously I've got a chunk in that tyre. Can you see that? No, you can't. I've not fully race prepared these cars. This one is the Schumacher, but the A12, the X12 is not hence why the rear end's a bit narrow. So the difference is when you go straight to the back of the car is you notice on the E3 is that you've got this this spring that is essentially in place of the center spring on the X12. It works in tandem with the damper in the middle of the car, and so being honest, if you're having to deal with a damper and a spring, I believe that's way easier than having to deal with a center shock. A center shock is again, focused on a newbie, is an absolute ball ache, because you've got to start talking about rebounds. You've got to be talking about the length of the shock, making sure that the preload on the spring as well is correct, to make sure that the ride height is correct in the middle. This is all stuff that I've learned along the way from people like David Spashett, Ollie Payne, Andy Murray, Alex Hagberg, all the lovely people out there that help this class. Come from this car over to this car as your first car without the center shock. This is by far and away something that's going to be very easy to build and start you off with. This one, not so much. The adjustability on this car, I believe, is smaller than this one. So on the rear of the car also is this droop screw here. It sets the amount of droop, and it also sets the anti-squat of the pod. The anti-squat, if you're not familiar, is the angle that the pod sits at, which changes the way the car performs. And this screw here that you can see, if I bring that up close to the camera there, just in there, that screw there, it's a grub screw that screws down from the top, adjusts, let's say, the anti-squat and the rear droop, along with, sorry, the rear droop's actually set by the preload on the rear spring. Apologies. So it's a much easier way of setting the rear end of the car. Again, in the manual, very clear identification of how long that screw needs to be, and it also gives you a measurement of how much droop you want to run as well, which is very easy to set. As I say, none of this is on the rear of the car on the X12. That's all done by the center shock. So just cut to some questions. Yes, Stu, the CD rack has been reserved by a friend. Brilliant. I normally see my local race car. I'll have to take it once we are back at racing. Raymond Q. Smuckles. Couldn't agree more. Center shocks are a massive pain, and the reason why I moved to the E3 from the X-Ray / Capricorn, it was also easier to get setup advice. Yep, absolutely. I think I think the setup advice, because of the volume of Schumacher drivers, which is brought on by the deals that they do drivers, which is a whole new other conversation. I'm not saying it's a negative. They do an exceptional deal for people that sign contracts to run Schumacher cars, etc. That has a huge ability to create a big depth in the pits, which therefore gives you a better opportunity to access setup advice, which is passed down through the ranks, from an Andy Murray down to a Louis Parker, down to Steve Donald, and then down to another, all the different runs of driver. And I think you have that opportunity to access that advice. X-Ray, not so easy. There's people like Matt Lax, I was running it, Jody Sherratt was running it before he went to Schumacher. There were lots of X-Ray guys, should I say, there were X-Ray guys that were running the car, because there wasn't the depth and the quality that maybe a Schumacher team has or a Zen team has. I think it then makes you not feel quite so comfortable going to the guys that are, say, in a C final or D final like I were at the time. Wouldn't really give you the same confidence as if you went to a Steve Donald, who has got good affinity with Andy Murray and the other guys that are getting a setup sheet. So I think Schumacher does give you the opportunity to get a bigger depth of knowledge with setup sheets. So that's the back of that car. The difference on the new X12 is that the rear of the car has a slightly different setup. You can no longer change the length of the rear axle, so the rear end of the car is no longer adjustable, but that is also the same with the E3. You can't change the length of the car. I did say in my Facebook stream that you could change the length of the car from the pivot, but actually that doesn't change the length of the car. That only changed the pivot point. I got led down a garden path by a good friend on that one. I'll take some of the blame, Andy Thompson, not all of it though. So the adjustability of the length of the rear end is now gone. In place of that, you have got a nicer system of how you change the ride height. Used to be a couple of bolts on here that would pull off, and you'd take the axle carriers out, and then you'd change the ride height. That was an absolute ball ache. And Nigel Bowen actually came out with a really nice upgrade to that. But that's now gone, and it's now gone back into these inserts that push in to the side of the car. Let me take the rear wheel off. I'm sure you'll all understand it anyway. So you've got these inserts here, just like the old GT12 cars. These inserts here push in and out with various measurements. Makes it really easy to change your rear ride height and work it out on the fly instead of putting epoxy shims in. So that's a really good improvement that they've done. And I think, you know, I had a Wire X12, a Yokomo, that had a performance window the size of something very small. I can't think what is very small. No rude comments, James. And I was in New York, and I remember sitting next to Ollie Payne and Dave Spashett, and they were mocking the old system of these inserts, and before you know it, it's gone from how it moved away from the inserts going back to these inserts. And I think the view and opinion of 12 scale that it needs to be really pernickety to be fast has changed. I think there's been a real shift in of the core components of a 12 scale car and how we can get the best out of the car while still being very robust. I think that's a huge step forward for the class in general. So James, the rear of the car is a lot narrower because I haven't adjusted the width of the rear of the car. I just haven't got it fully prepped for race. The ride height's not right either, so hence why it looks very narrow on the rear on the X-ray car. So the ride height is a huge improvement. They've also put these locators in here, which stops the rear pod tweaking. If you've never seen an E3 before, it's not a split chassis. It's one full chassis, and then the pod sits on top of that chassis. So it's a very different makeup. The rear pod on the E3, I've given it some serious wax, and I can't ever really remember needing to take it off to reset the rear pod. I would do anyway, but just because I like to do it now and then at a meeting. But this center screw, if the pod tweaks, this would go off center, and it would point to the pod being tweaked. But I've never had that happen with all the time I've been running the car, so it's very robust in that nature. So that's really there. And then moving forwards, this used to be a really weak part in the X12, the 20 car. These bolts here, they've gone 2 bolts and a locator in here. Let me take it off and I'll show you. So these two. And you can see there's a, let me just get that on the camera there. There we go. So there's a locator pin here in between these two bolts. There used to only be a singular bolt there, and you used to actually have to Loctite that down because it would come loose during a run if you didn't. So that was a weak point in the car, which is, by the fact that they've now got two bolts there and a locator pin, I can't see that being an issue. So that's a good improvement as well. So that's sort of moving forwards. Obviously, you've only got one here. I think the whole rear end of the Schumacher, there is actually no real opportunity to find out if it is perfectly straight, because there's no real flat spot in one of these 12 scale cars. You can put the whole pod plate onto the deck and find out if it's twisted. You can't really do that with an E3, so it's a little bit awkward. Luke Westwood, what do you think of the new rubber tyres coming out? Next question, hideous. Yeah, not for me, Luke. Anyone else got any views on that? Welcome to discuss as we go along. Rubber tyres, it just screams touring car, and the reason why I never got involved in touring car is because of the black art of additive, and just hated it. It's a beauty with buggy racing. You just stick some tyres on, go out and run it in the UK with 12 scale and foam tyres. They're additive, and there's some additives out there and that work better than others, and also I'm sure there's skullduggery that goes on with additive as well in foam racing. I don't want to put don't want to mix up a hornet's nest there, but I think any race that any tyre that runs so heavily around an additive, I think you're causing a whole world of hurt, and I think rubber tyres do that. So not for me, thanks. So moving forwards in both the cars, obviously that's when we come to this centre shock against the damper. Again, that's when I covered it when I was talking more about the rear end of the car. If we then look at the pivots on the car here, I think this is something that was really very interesting. The roll centre on the rear of the car of the E3 was a really major player, I think, in these low grip conditions of the car, and I think the X-ray is now, I think it's 2 millimeters lower than their previous car, which I think is a huge step forwards. They've changed how the cutout on the old chassis is, whereas it you used to have the plastic pivot that used to sit on top of the chassis. It used to bind when it was waxed. Now this has adopted this sort of GT12 again pivot that we're all using on the Zen car, RX12. So it's all changed, the pivot style. So they really don't tweak these pivots at all. They don't lock up, don't have anything to lock up on, which is great. You also have an adjustable pin in there or bolt that, if you do get a little bit of play in your pivots through the wear of the plastics, you can just tighten it up a little bit just to keep it nice and tight. So you take away all the play again. Another part that allows you to not have to go out and buy new parts, which is absolutely fantastic. I think the more that manufacturers appreciate the fact that the consumer doesn't want to have to keep on buying. I know the perishables. I know that that's part of keeping a hobby shop running, etc., etc. But I think there are more ways of making cash out of the consumer than making a car and its perishables. So James Stewart, they might be okay in high tractioning classes where the motor couldn't pull the skin off of a rice pudding, but foam in the traditional class is still, yeah, I totally agree. Foam for the original, for the traditional class is still, yeah, agree. Sorry, just having a quick sip on the tea. So then we move forwards. We've got the damper. I think what's quite interesting with the damper on the E3, I've never been talked to about changing the pitch of the damper. Nobody has ever mentioned that to me. Certainly something that might need to be played around with. I know Alex changes the damper elevation on the side of his 12 scale, lifting them up and pushing them down adds extra force on the roll of the car. So I think that's something that could be played with on the E3. I think in the X-ray manual they even reference that, the angle of the side damper. Again, another setup advice that comes with it. Again, all of these things that are so invaluable to someone that's new to the class, or even an old hand to it. There's so many things that you can start to tweak and adjust that you forget them. And I've got a little book that I put down in sections of what does what to the car, and so it allows me to, when I'm marshalling, and I think we've spoken about this on the podcast, when you're marshalling, you're thinking about what you want the car to do more of. If you've got certain parts of the track that you want the car to perform better at, I've got a little book that allows me to go to those sections, and I've listed out the changes that apply to those improvements. The shock angle, because it's a spring-loaded shock, the shock angle is quite a big player. So how this shock sits up or down. When I was running the 20 car at the Worlds, the flatter, we went much shorter in the shock angle, and shorter in the shock and much more horizontal without any angle. James Stewart, they might be okay. A flatter damper is more linear. Increasing the angle gives a rising rate. There you go. So James is on his the geometry of the car. So to many people, that goes straight over their head, James. And I think that's the point, that what that feels like in racing. So a flatter damper is more linear. I think the articulation of what do you need the car to do to make the changes to improve it is the art. Going out and driving the car and then trying to change it, I think that's where you've got to know what you're looking for. But absolutely agree with what you were saying there. So the angle of the damper, a big part of the X12. And I think already you're starting to see that the X12 has got more opportunity for alteration and change over the U3. So we now get to the front of the car, and I posted a picture on Instagram, and a few people commented on it. Oh, which it looks like the same car. Well, I can assure you, when you've got the two cars in front of you, these two front ends are dramatically different. So to start with, and I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll take the front wheels off, so you can have an insight. Now I left some silver wheel nuts on. No, I didn't. Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I've left some silver wheel nuts on because I had quite a few texts, Lee Palmer being one of them, about silver nuts, and Tony Broad about silver nuts. So it affects their watching. I know how to sort a car. If I could drive it, I would be dangerous. Well, I think you sell yourself a little short there, James. You were going pretty well with your A12 last time I was out. The one thing I would say is that you went slow as the day went on, as you played with it more. So maybe it's the other way around. You never know, sir. You never know. Sorry, James. So taking the wheels off. Apologies for the disgusting goop around the front end of this E3. Bit of a bugbear, that. Not a massive fan of the whole jollop that goes on with the front end of the E3, but it works very well. So you've got no top brace on the X12, so this would be more akin to the A12, the X-ray, far more away from the E3. Then you've got an ability to tighten up the front end. So you've got this cross beam here that can come off. So you can pull this top beam off here, and that's when it's at its most flexible. You can then remove these uprights and then put this onto the chassis as well, onto the lower arm as well. So you actually have three flex options of the front end for different levels of grip, and it goes with the bar at the top. That's the medium option. With no bar on at all, that's the most flexible. And then with the bar bolted to the bottom deck without the stand-ups, that's the stiffest. So you've got three options there. You haven't got any option to change the flex of the front. You have got these two bolts here that you take off to change the flex, as you have with here with the top brace. The pins that sit in the bottom arm are all preset. So you've got one at 1 degree camber, 1.5 degree camber, and 2 degrees of camber. I got the US kit that comes with 1.5 degrees of camber. Put it straight in, straight off at 1.5 degrees of both sides. I think that's the thing that worked really well with the E3, is how consistent the camber was. Now you've got to bear in mind that these top arms set the camber, or this top brace sets the camber on the E3. You're actually bending the body posts in because of the length of the top brace. So I prefer the arrangement of the X12 front end, being honest. And I've never been a fan of those metal hubs on the metal kingpins. There's always been a sticking point where you would reset the front end, clean it all up, and then when you push it, the shim at the bottom of the hub would stick to the bottom arm and then be sticky. It never affected its performance, because as soon as the car moved off, it would be moving all the time, so there's never an issue. But with but when we talk about freeing up the 12 scale and it being as free moving as possible, and then we get something sticky like that, it doesn't quite sit well for me, but it's a bloody good car. So Downfall, Dave Spashett's book is quite good. 12 scale Zen Racing. I bought it for increasing my knowledge of the cars. I think understanding how the car works helps in my GT12 car. It's absolutely down. Understanding it is a very big part of the equation. James Stewart, just playing to get a feel of how the car changes. In fact, it's so different. All existing knowledge has gone out the window, and that was my point, James. That's the reason why I didn't stay with the A12, because it was so different. And I think when it is so different, I don't want to spend a year trying to work out that car and then another car comes along. So that was my reason for not doing it. Has James had any issues with the kingpins moving, bending on the A12? Any thoughts on that, James? Did you bend any kingpins? Because you definitely gave your car a mighty whack. I might even have a video of it, James, that I could repost on this YouTube channel. But again, when you whacked it, James, you were able to drive off into the distance. And I think this is just a massive leap forward for 12 scale, the ability to not have a car that tweaks when you look at it. So as I say, plastic hubs on this car, on the X12 as well. So that that was a big step forwards. And I'm just going to quickly stick the front wheels back on again. Any other questions while going on? James, not seen any so far, Stu, but only had the opportunity to run it beyond the Tamworth Club. I gave it a few strength tests. Yes, you did. Yes, you did, James. You gave it some strength tests, for sure. And I think that's a really valid point. You know, you get the likes of Alex Hagberg and Andy Murray and Ollie Payne testing these cars, when really you want to give it to some people that really give it a decent whack and see how it goes, because I think that really gives you more insight into the ability of the car to still perform after it's been chewed by a barrier. So just put those on there. So you've all, hopefully you've all seen the post about the first round of the 12 scale NMP series, on-road NMP series has now been moved back a week. Are you down, James? Can you not make that now? It'd be great to have you there, pal. It's actually very similar to the X-ray design. Just you rotate the kingpin towards. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I thought that was it was genius how they've set the front end on the A12. You rotate the pin in the hub, as it were, and it sets the variety of camber, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Caster is preset. No, it's not. You can adjust the caster. I think the standard setting is 3 degrees of caster, and I believe that Alex goes on about that because of the new front and the new rear end, and how we're all running spools. They've also altered the bumper, the bumper plate that had been running for 2 or 3 seasons, I believe, and then the BRCA decided that it was illegal. It's quite funny. They've sort of sorted that, and that's pretty much it. Now, I think one of the things that is quite overwhelming is how much space in the chassis that you've got. Let me just measure the widest point of the chassis. 115. Yeah, so the widest point of the chassis on the X-ray is 118, and on the E3 it's 116. It's more narrow, obviously, as you can see here, but strangely, it's actually narrower down here, but it's obviously the way. Oh, okay, yeah, there you go. So the way these top arms now come over the top of the side links is what just gives you that extra space. So they've really X-ray have really pushed out. Yeah, so this part here, you can see where they've just kicked it out a bit more, which has just made that top brace give you this extra bit of room around the bottom of the shock and damper. Yeah, check them, James. Get yourself along there. Yeah, so there's a bit more room in there as well. Track width on the front. Oh, of course, can't go wider than a certain thing. That they're both pretty much the same. Let me just measure that very quickly. 165, 164, actually slightly narrower on the X-ray by a mil. I think that's about it. Oh, the other thing is the weight of this car is really good. 715 grams fully loaded, which I think is a great asset. Being able to play around with a little bit of weight. The E3 was really quite difficult to get it down. You had to have a screw set, and even when you had a screw set on, it was still too heavy. Whereas the X-ray out the box is much lighter, and my much more speedo I think is slightly heavier than the average bear as well. What ESC have you got? Oh, well, I just said it, James. I've got much more ESC in there. I went up to MB Models just to run my A12, and I just picked up a different ESC just to try it, see if it was any different. So I ran that in the A12 and sold the A12 to Nigel Bowen. So I then popped that in to the X-ray, and I think that's about it really. Any other questions before we wrap this little feed up? Well, it's been great having you along, and I'm going to be doing quite a few of these videos through lockdown to keep me occupied and try and build up the channel and its subscribers. See if we can get some other guests on. I might actually try and tap up Lee Martin, who's a great buggy driver but's got a lot of knowledge. It'd be great to get him on and have a chat to him. He's someone with a different view and opinion on things. So we'll end it there. Hope you're all well. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll all catch up soon.